Let's take an early look at the fatal crash of a Learjet 55 that occurred Friday, January 31st in Philadelphia. The aircraft was a Lear 55 on a Medevac mission, had just departed Northeast Philadelphia Airport bound for Springfield, Missouri for a fuel stop and then on to Tijuana International, its final destination. It was a Medevac mission with 6 souls on board. Sadly, all perished in this crash, in addition to 1 person killed on the ground and 22 injuries. Sadly, this crash occurred just 2 days after the tragic mid-air collision between a Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines CRJ-700 near Washington National Airport. And our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families affected by these 2 tragic mishaps. Several videos have been made public about this Learjet crash near Philadelphia, and all seem to show the Learjet 55 descending out of the cloud layer at a near vertical angle, and the videos seem to indicate that the engines were at high power and the aircraft lights were lit. None of the videos we looked at seem to indicate smoke or fire trailing the aircraft in any way. The aircraft was a Lear 55, as we mentioned, and it was registered in Mexico, flown by a Mexican crew, and it was owned by Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. Northeast Philadelphia Airport is a very busy general aviation airport. It's the 4th busiest airport in Pennsylvania, and it's located in underlying the Philadelphia International Class B airspace. The takeoff from runway 24 puts the departure track right over a dense urban development area, as can be depicted on this sectional chart. The weather in Northeast Philly at the time of this mishap was IFR. 6 miles viz, light rain, 400-foot overcast, with a temperature and dew point were at 9 degrees. The METAR data I pulled 50 minutes after this crash from ForeFlight showed that the overcast had lifted to 700 feet and the temperature dew point was now 10 degrees. We spoke with several Lear 55 pilots and none of them indicated that this weather observation would have been enough for them to cancel the flight due to weather. There were several airmets issued for the Philadelphia area at the time of this aircraft's departure at 6:05 p.m. Friday night. One was for low-level wind shear, which was valid from 2045Z, about 2 hours prior to departure, and it called for airspeed gain or loss of 20 knots or more below 2,000 feet. There was also a graphic airmet for IFR, which was typical that night, and it called for ceilings below 1,000 and visibility of 3 miles, and we know it was a little bit better than that. From NTSB Exchange, we examined the flight track data, and the aircraft had been cleared for takeoff by Philly Tower, Northeast Philly Tower, and was told to turn right to a heading of 290 as they climbed out. The ground track indicates that they started that right turn and something happened to cause the aircraft to appear to come back to the left and start a descent all the way to impact. We analyzed the data points and it shows that the flight topped out at 1,650 feet and a speed of 222 knots in its climb before it started descending and accelerating rapidly. ATC audio that we examined for this flight appeared fairly normal for a pilot and an aircraft being cleared for takeoff out of Northeast Philly. The last transmission from the pilot was, and I quote, 123.8, Medevac 56, thank you, have a good day. The audio appeared fairly normal and the pilot's voice did not seem to be stressed. In another video, the aircraft lights can be seen and the engines can be heard at high power as the aircraft descends rapidly out of the overcast all the way to impact. The NTSB will conduct an exhaustive investigation on this mishap, and they'll come out with their recommendations and probable cause determination in 1.5 to 2 years. And we don't know yet how they'll classify this mishap, but something certainly caused the aircraft to lose control while it was climbing out of Northeast Philly. We don't know if it was pilot-induced, we don't know if it was weather-induced, we don't know if it was a system component failure that caused this. But these will be areas that the NTSB will focus on clearly. Was it caused by the weather? Did the low-level wind shear, plus or minus 20 knots, affect the aircraft? Pilots we spoke to said that that would certainly cause a bumpy ride, but it would probably not be enough of a wind shear to cause the aircraft to stall on one wing and a loss of control or an upset. The aircraft was climbing and accelerating past 200 knots, and a plus or minus 20 knot wind shear would not take the airspeed down to anywhere near the stall speed of a Lear 55. Was there an aircraft system malfunction? This again will be only determined by the NTSB after all of the data is analyzed. Pilots we spoke with said it's very common in a Lear 55 for 3 steps to occur fairly shortly right after takeoff. And that is landing gear up, flaps up, yaw damper engaged. Most of the pilots we spoke to said they typically didn't engage autopilot until passing 10,000 feet, but they stressed that that was a pilot preference. So shortly after takeoff, the aircraft would have had its landing gear up, the flaps would have come up, and yaw damper would have been engaged. We don't know what happened, but it could have been a system component failure because at about the time the aircraft was starting its right turn to 290, it came back to the left and started a very steep descent. Or was this pilot error? Did the pilots experience some kind of spatial disorientation as they were climbing, cleaning up the aircraft, and entering the overcast? Was that perhaps exacerbated by some kind of system failure? Only the NTSB will know that after their investigation. We do know that the voice recorder was recovered by the NTSB, and that will certainly shed light on what was going on in the cockpit after what appeared to be very normal communications with the tower for the last transmission of the aircraft. It's important to recognize and review the accident trends for general aviation. 42% of all fatal accidents are caused by loss of control in flight. 5% of fatal accidents are caused by system component failure, non-power plant. We believe the engines sounded like they were working. We don't know if it was one or both, but 5% of fatal mishaps are caused by system component failures other than the power plant. And finally, even though it's way too early to understand what happened to this aircraft and what caused its crash, we feel it's important for pilots to take away some early lessons so that maybe these mishaps can be prevented in the future. So thoughts that we have for general aviation pilots. Certainly the importance of a thorough pre-flight cannot be understated always. After takeoff, do you have a plan? What are you going to do if? I do this all the time when I'm flying my Bonanza. What do I do if I lose an engine? What do I do if I have a split flap situation on takeoff? I pre-brief all of the worst case scenarios in the most critical time of liftoff and climbing out, so I'm ready. And it's also important to mentally make sure you stay in positive control of your aircraft at all times, especially when you're lifting off right into an overcast at 400 feet. I try to minimize the number of steps that I have to do immediately after takeoff into IMC, just so that I can focus on the most important things, to me, are attitude and airspeed, until I'm comfortably established on the climb and well away from the ground. Also, a pilot pre-brief or reviewing all the cockpit resource management steps between this pilot and co-pilot would have been in order. There's plenty to be learned from this mishap, and there's more we'll find out when the NTSB publishes its final determination. Thank you very much.